Hi, welcome to Catch Me If You Can, Modern iOS Spyware and the Vanishing Forensic Trail. So, lightning round, here's the agenda. A lot of content. I'm going to apologize preemptively for probably talking real quick. I'm Kevin Hoganson, Senior Threat Hunter at iVerify. I come from an offensive background. I used to work for the government. Been in the CTI game for a little while. I extensively tracked a lot of Russian actors, a lot of bear activity, had a lot of fun doing it. Here at iVerify, I now focus exclusively on the evolving spyware threat, as well as mobile surveillance capabilities. So, quick primer for the commercial spyware landscape. As we see it, we see spyware and its vendors in the headlines targeting journalists, civil society, political figures, or entire demographics. There are a number of industry partners, government agencies, and NGOs which actively track this ecosystem, perhaps most notably folks like Citizen Lab, Amnesty, Google's Threat Intelligence Group, among others. So it's kind of common knowledge that governments acquire these capabilities, use them, they're advanced. We're starting to track movement of capital across geographic regions with the end goal of funding R&D for spyware. And the commercial spyware vendors are in a unique position of kind of being outclassed by competitors, which may trigger the reputation death, the migration of talented spyware developers between vendor entities, or an entire rebrand. The talent within the spyware world is also extremely niche and kind of cutthroat. And the CSV landscape is actively proliferating across borders. It's kind of an ecosystem which accounts for a huge number of sophisticated exploits in the wild. The partnerships here are complex and difficult to understand. But to understand spyware's evolution, we're going to quickly backtrack a little bit, travel through time, and review NSO Group's historic efforts in compromising iPhones. NSO Group's victimology is really well documented, and we have a retrospective insight into their TTPs. So back in 2016, NSO used to rely on persistence mechanisms, quite literally using remote jailbreaks, which are super noisy in nature. Traditional forensics easily identified the indicators of compromise, and once NSO's groups, once their methods were burnt with a huge amount of bad press, they overhauled their methods, and instead of persisting, they elected to re-exploit the target to leave no trace behind. We'll leave that in air quotes. No one's looking, and they'll blend into the network traffic anyway. So at this time, investigating network infrastructure could expose all of NSO's infection chain. A VPN configuration could reasonably capture the actual implant itself. So come 2019, NSO Group operates exclusively with one-click chains or stealthy zero-click infection chains. Apple's technology stack is expanding and naturally increases its remote attack surface over time. And every subsequent disclosure of NSO Group's implant prompted significant changes to their tactics. Here we see NSO Group's bridgehead process as a standout. It's explicitly identified in net usage and data usage databases. And depending on the infection chain, other artifacts from web browsing may also be crucial during investigations. So come 2021, NSO Group brings to bear the sophistication which kind of competes with nation-state actors. In the case of, for example, forced entry, NSO reduces the number of exploits needed to compromise the iPhone device by using mechanisms which exist as part of the operating system itself. They start to spoof core services, as seen here in the table, and they're extensive about the artifact cleanup during post-exploitation processes. In terms of what NSO Group is actually cleaning up, the agent is firstly responsible for securely wiping the payload from the file system. Note the improved tradecraft here, disabling analytics, suppressing the logs during agent execution, and burning off of the device within an hour or two after the implant actually starts running. And come 2022, we see yet another evolution. Pegasus wipes the shutdown log, which wouldn't receive notoriety until 2024 in the disclosure of triangulation. It's a very important log artifact, and wiping it in and of itself is telling, sure. As of iOS version 26 recently, this artifact is now wiped between every power cycle, which has dramatic implications for us. Now, fast forward to 2023, more or less where we are now. We're talking about an agent which delivers the functionality through iMessage, end-to-end encrypted and ephemeral in nature. The infection chain deliberately destroys crash artifacts, which may actually indicate to analysts how exploitation occurred in the first place. It burns off within a narrow self-destruct window. It leverages technique reuse and multi-stage deployment to ensure analysis is really difficult. And although the key is transmitted to the loader over iMessage, there's no guarantee we'll ever be able to acquire it. And in 2024, 2025, things are still TBD. For the audience, for anyone have any insights here, we'd love to collaborate with you. Please reach out. So far, we've seen Pegasus in action from 2016, 2023. I know that was quick, sorry. NSO Group in particular excels in learning from disclosures and enhancing tradecraft over time. Now, we can review one of our more recent analytic efforts, which exposes commercial spyware's tendency to tamper with or altogether destroy artifacts that are necessary for forensic data analysis. We rely on this as part of our investigations, crucially. So this sample is actually believed to be developed by Turkey-based PARS, P-A-R-S Defense, who reigns as the Turkish go-to for iOS exploitation. The historic disclosure of the group actually triggered the minimization of their online presence. Said another way, they went into hiding. And the sample seen here today is called NoClip and likely exploits Apple's WebKit as part of the infection chain. Crucially, this implant is destroying artifacts which are associated with the analytics daemon, Apple push notifications, and identity services, which may be part of the exploit flow or target reconnaissance through Apple services. And if we broaden the scope a little bit, we know failed exploitation attempts against remote attack surfaces or containerized client applications might generate crash logs. NoClip destroys specifically the logs that are maintained by Crash Reporter and cleans up after itself once the one-click infection is actually successful. And here we have a variety of data sources that specifically relate to application and process telemetry, which processes started when and what context. We also note the inclusion of 2 directories related to on-device unified logs, which are really extensive and can describe an enormous amount of device events across various timeframes. So once the NoClip agent actually receives execution, it's been implanted on the device, this is what the main functionality kind of looks like. It's a sequence of functions responsible for collection. But notice something unique here. Between every agent module is the pwn citizen lab function, literally, in an explicit way. This function tramples or deletes the forensic data sources we saw just a few moments ago. And the reason why this function is called pwn citizen lab is specifically because these forensic data sources have, time and time again, been involved in Citizen Lab's investigative efforts. They've proven meaningful and important, and these data sources have the potential to burn deployed implants. So how does this actually conduct implant? Well, kind of short on time, but NoClip exhibits a fun technique. In summary, it hijacks legitimate processes and services on the iOS, which is really hard to do, and uses different process contexts to conduct malicious tasking. And one way to think about this guy is by seeing him kind of like a debugger, a bridge between some local process and a remote child process, which hasn't yet been spawned. Some malicious alterations are made to that process, then the process is finally kicked off. And the end result is that the parent process, namely the agent, can leverage legitimate iOS processes to clean up after itself, which makes analysis significantly harder. The fight against the CSV ecosystem right now is reliant on traditional forensics. Utilities exist such as Mobile Verification Toolkit, MVT, full file system dump capabilities, and these are the current standard for response to spyware threats. But here's the problem. It's kind of paramount the victim provides their phone in a timely fashion for the acquisition of that data, if they're even aware of the compromise in the first place. And there's no guarantee that forensic investigators will actually get their hands on the device as part of triage because of privacy concerns. Moreover, we see NoClip as a case study of how CSV adversaries learn and adapt, implementing novel techniques in response to the valuable reports that we publish in the first place. The going dark problem describes how commercial spyware vendors respond to the modern detection mechanisms, which are largely focused on one-time data acquisitions with digital forensic methods on hand. Post-mortem analysis is increasingly challenging, and defenders should consider continuous monitoring and the frequent acquisition of telemetry as part of the solution. Here we have a summarized breakout of an attack chain, for example, from infill to burning off. If infiltration is successful, we'll likely see crashes and other traces of exploitation. If the agent receives execution, we will assume that the cleanup may occur during its lifetime, and they may have to interact with the system to collect target information at any point during these processes. Something, however, may go wrong. Adversaries are human, they're not perfect, which means that they're likely to leave something behind. This visual represents data and telemetry from different forensic artifacts. Currently, there are no indicators of compromise present on this timeline. This is an altered timeline with a legitimate Pegasus infection. This is the same Pegasus infection post-cleanup, but this is interesting. One strong IOC may be visible within the encrypted backup instance, but we've cleaned it, of course. Several others are also cleaned up, but the others are still present unbeknownst to NSO Group or other CSV actors. So enter continuous monitoring. The question then becomes, how do we acquire telemetry in a consistent way, in a meaningful way, such that it informs investigations and analysis? Our timeline kind of looks like this now. More telemetry acquired over time, additional IOC coverage. Between a Sysdiagnose archive and the collection of device telemetry, we have 2 more IOCs which point to historical or current infections. And in an ideal scenario, we automate the acquisition of Sysdiagnose archives and telemetry, which provide significant coverage for this device behavior. So, kind of solving it, 1, we should continue to collect forensic data as frequently as possible. As security researchers, we also have an obligation to explore new kinds of telemetry. Heuristics and behavioral detections will be necessary going forward, and IOCs are still entirely relevant. We can, of course, leverage the existing Intel feeds, synthesized data, whatever. And of course, continuous monitoring is most effective when it's paired with network threat intelligence, identity intelligence, digital forensics, the whole shebang. And we'll also need a whole lot of coffee. Thank you.